enthusiasts. So PL is all back together. Sorry to confuse you, the cars have moved around at the moment. So Sprout's back and we're doing some work on Sprout and we're doing jobs all over the place at the moment. So I did mention earlier that I'm going to replace the coolant with Evans Waterless Coolant, which is, yeah, can be quite controversial because different people have different opinions on it. I'll give you my opinion. This is not sponsored or anything like that, and I've never used Evans Waterless Coolant before, so it's kind of a bit of an experimentation for me to see what it's like, and yeah, I'll let you know how I get on in a later video. So it sounds a bit odd, waterless coolant. Well, that is exactly what it is. So most coolants in cars from the manufacturer are 50% antifreeze and 50% water. So that might be ethyl glycol, it might be another chemical that goes in there that acts as an antifreeze. Waterless coolant has no H2O in it at all, no water. So the biggest benefits of that is water boils at 100 degrees C and it freezes at 0. So the operating temperature of a modern engine, they actually operate above 100 degrees C a lot of times, maybe 103, 105 degrees. And they do that just because they run more efficiently at that temperature. Now they're able to run higher than the boiling point of water because the system is under pressure. So if you pressurize the system, you raise the boiling point of water, which is why you have pressure cookers and things like that. And also antifreeze itself has the effect that it raises the boiling point of water, but it's not by much. So instead of water boiling at 105 degrees or 100 degrees, put it under pressure, put antifreeze in it, and it might boil at maybe 108, 110 degrees, maybe a little bit higher if the system operates under a lot of pressure, but they generally operate around about 15 psi. So that doesn't give much headroom between operating temperature and the point that the water boils, but it is a very, very good indication, boiling water, that you've got a problem with your engine. So the great bit about water-based coolants is if it does overheat, if you're not driving along, you're ignoring the temperature gauge, you're not listening to noises from the engine like pinking where it might be pre-igniting, you're not getting those visual clues or smells or anything that it's running hot, the first thing you'll know about it is steam coming out everywhere, because the pressure cap on the system is designed to blow off when the water gets above boiling temperature to prevent it damaging the actual cooling system itself. Now the danger of waterless coolant is it won't do that. So this won't boil until 180 degrees C, which is sufficiently high enough to have caused quite a bit of damage to your engine if you ignore it. So that's one disadvantage. I would say though, and I would like to think I know cars well enough and I would have the experience, even without a temperature gauge on the car, I'm pretty sure I would know something was wrong with my engine overheating wise without the gauge. Like I say, I've had it before where you haven't noticed the gauge. First thing you notice is the engine pinking, smoking out the back. You know, by then, to be honest, you might have already started doing quite a bit of damage. But on PL, it's got a water gauge on it. It's also got an oil temperature gauge, which I monitor quite closely as well. So the oil in the engine actually acts like a coolant as well. So if you watch engine oil temperature, that can be a good indication if you've got something going wrong with your engine as well. So there's plenty of cues on PL on the MPI Mini. So I'm not overly worried about that, to be honest. It's quite expensive. So this kit, I did manage to get this a little bit cheaper. It's prep fluid, which cleans out the system, and then you put the waterless coolant in there, and it works out. Some places it's around about 100 quid. I managed to get this for 75 quid because it was on offer, but it's still quite a bit more expensive than standard sort of coolants. Obviously water, you know, if you want it waterless, you've got to get all the water out of the system, and Evans actually recommend that you can have a certain amount of water in the system, but it's only 3%, which is a tiny amount. It really is small. On a mini MPI, I think it has a 4 litre cooling system, so we're talking 100 mil, 125 mil water, so it's not much at all. You use the prep fluid to get all of that water out. So you first drain all the coolant out, you pump air through the pipes, you try and get as much coolant out as you can, and obviously just doing what I've done on PL is ideal because I've had the head off, I've had the radiator off, I've emptied that out, I've blown air through the heater matrix to get as much as I can out the heater matrix, and I even went as far as when the water pump was off, dabbing a rag inside the actual block to get the last dregs of water out. So I'm pretty confident there's very, very little water in there anyway. But the prep fluid, I'm assuming it's hygroscopic like brake fluid, so it absorbs water. They do actually say if you keep it in a sealed container, you can reuse the prep fluid maybe once, twice, depending how dirty the coolant is, depending how much water it's got in it. So my plan with this is I shall try it on PL. If I'm happy with it, I will do Sprout with the same problem, with the same sort of mix, and I won't have to pay for the prep fluid a second time, so it'll work out a little bit cheaper. So why am I doing it? Just because I've always had this thing with Sprout, with PL, and I noticed with Sprout as well, they run at quite a lot of pressure. So when they're up at running temperature, the hoses are quite hard, the system's well pressurised, and you just get, as cars get older, you know, pipes, connectors, hoses, they just don't seal as well as they did when they're brand new. And when it runs up under pressure, you just get little leaks here and there and that sort of thing. So the fact that the Evans waterless coolant doesn't boil until 180, so at normal operating temperature, it's nowhere near the boiling point, means there's less vapour being created in the system. So they actually say that when you run it on the Evans coolant, and we'll try it, there's hardly any pressure in the hoses at all. So that puts far less strain on the cooling system. There are some points against Evans waterless coolant. So you can't really get better than plain water at transferring heat away from an engine. Like I said earlier, you can get some additives which make it cling to the surfaces a bit better. So you get better heat absorption from the water that's in there, but nothing carries away the heat much better than water, to be honest. So it's not quite as good at cooling in theory, but the fact that you don't get problems with cavitation, you don't get problems with localized vapor being created in the engine, or localized points in the engine maybe reaching boiling point, I think negates that anyway. I've got a perfect example here. So this is the header tank off Sprout. Can you see how deformed it is? And you see this with a lot of MPIs when they start to get a bit older. The coolant expansion bottles, they're only plastic. Sorry chaps, I don't quite know what happened there, but I reviewed the footage and it kind of all went wrong at that point and wouldn't play it back. So I can't quite remember where I was getting to. I was talking about the header tank, which I've now fitted on PL. On Project Sprout, and yeah, I was saying that with the cooling system, because it pressurizes and gets hot, cold, that puts a strain on the cooling system, and it causes things like the old header tank there, which I think is in the bin now, and over time it just caused that to crack. So anyway, I think I gave enough as an explanation. If you've got any questions, let me know below and I'll try and answer them. I think I was talking about motorsport as well. So there's some tracks in America, not sure in the UK, but they ban waterless coolant, or you're not allowed to use it in race cars and track cars. The reason for that is because it's waterless, it doesn't evaporate and it's very slippy. So it's the same as sort of if the cooling system were to leak and it were to get on the track, it's like trying to get oil off the track. So there are some places where it's prohibited, but it's not going in PL, and it's not going to be used as a track car or a race car or anything like that. So it doesn't really, that's not a reason I need to be concerned about. So I've probably waffled on for long enough. Let me get the prep fluid flushed in PL. We'll run that through, and then we'll add the waterless coolant, and I'll let you know how we get on. Right chaps, I thought I'd just give a little tip here. So if you're going to do this Evans waterless coolant thing, follow the instructions. There's plenty of other YouTube videos, official sort of Evans videos that tell you how to do it. Obviously the first thing is getting as much water, the old antifreeze, out the car as you can before you put the prep fluid in. So the prep fluid has less work to do. So as I say, in my case, it was ideal because I could take the radiator out, take the water pump out and flush them all out properly. So there was very little water in there. I then put in the prep fluid, which was about probably about 3.84 litres of prep fluid. So on the left here is the old prep fluid. On the right is the waterless coolant, which we're about to put in. So what I found really useful, so we started out with 5 litres, which is about here. As you can see the comparison with the coolant on here, so it would have been slightly above that line. So at the moment we've probably got about just over 3.5 litres in there. So I know it started out with 4 litres, so there's less than half a litre missing. Some of it is irrecoverable, so I put drain trays underneath the car and I put a bucket underneath the car. So when you empty the bucket back in here, you get all the horrible gunge in the bottom, which are thrown away. So that's probably 50 mil, 100 mil. You get some which you don't get in the drain trays, get on the bucket, which drip on the floor. So this stuff is the consistency of a light oil, and it is quite oily. So you want to, when you're draining it, you want to make sure you don't spill it anywhere because it is quite messy. But the important thing is to try and get all that prep fluid back out again. Now, unless I took the radiator off again, unless I took the water pump out again, you're not going to get everything, but you want to get as much as possible out. And I'm pretty pleased with that. So I've probably spilt and thrown away probably a couple of 100 mil. So it looks like I've got pretty much all the prep fluid back out. A compressor or some sort of blower or something like that is a must, just to make sure you can blow down the hoses, take all the pipes off, take the heater matrix pipes off, blow compressed air through it. You've got to try and get as much as you can of that prep fluid back out again, to allow you to put the Evans waterless coolant in here. So when you work it out, when I said to begin with there was very little water in there because I had the whole engine stripped apart, they recommend 3%. So I think, did I say earlier, I've done the calculations with how much water I put in, and there was probably, at the worst, there was probably about 6 or 7% water still in there. Less than that, I think. So then you put 4 litres of the prep fluid in there, which is hygroscopic, which will soak up water, and then you take all of that out, so it will be under 3% of water in the system now. So now we're going to put the Evans waterless coolant up, we'll run it up, and I'll speak to you in a moment. Right guys, sorry about the noise, hopefully you can hear me okay. If not, I'll be dubbing this bit over, but as you can hear, the radiator fan's cutting, it's up to running temperature. Cycled the fan about 3 or 4 times now, and literally there is no pressure in the system. That fan is going at the moment, it's up to running temperature. The temperature gauge is on normal. Normally if you took off the cap now it would scold you. There is literally no pressure there, so that's up probably about 9800 degrees. Fans cutting in. And as I say, no pressure at all. I've just turned it off. You can hear the exhaust tinging away where it is hot. Like I say, I've run it through probably about 4 or 5 cooling cycles now, which is a fan cutting and then cutting out. Again, no pressure there whatsoever. I'm really pleased with that. Obviously we'll do a bit of a long-term test with it and I'll report back, let you know how I got on. Got to say, I don't like the colour of it. It's like a horrible greeny colour, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, let's see how we get on, and I'll report back. But initial sort of thoughts, very good. It probably did take me over 2 hours by the time I flushed it all out, added the prep fluid, got all the prep fluid out, took all the hoses off, blew through them, put them back together, then put the Evans coolant in, then run it up. As I say, it was probably a good couple of hours of faffing around. And the biggest point to mention here, one of the subscribers said about it actually, I've flushed this cooling system lots of times. It's always had 50/50 antifreeze in it, good quality antifreeze. Every time I take the antifreeze out, there's more rust in it. There's more rust that collects in the top of the header tank. Exactly the same with Sprout. All the time there's water in the system. It's a cast iron block, cast iron head. It will rust. Even though antifreeze has rust inhibitors in it, it will rust. Obviously, if you take away all the water, there's no chance of it rusting again. So, yeah, in general, pretty pleased.